I'm Harv Nagra. I'm an operations consultant, a former in house agency operations director, and head of brand communications at Scoro. Welcome to The Handbook, the Agency Operations Podcast, a space where we talk to fellow experts and operations leaders about agency life, discussing the challenges keeping us up at night, as well as strategies that help make things run a little bit smoother. Hey all, welcome back. The irony of agencies being bad at their own marketing would be funny if it didn't have such negative consequences on the bottom line. But whose problem is it when an agency has a poor or non existing marketing strategy? Well, I may be biased, but I tend to think everything is the ops director's problem when it's not working. But of course, in this case, it goes beyond the ops director. It's also the MD's problem and everyone else's problem if the lack of marketing is hurting your pipeline and you're not hitting your revenue targets. 2023 was a difficult year for most of us. And while every year starts with hope and optimism, 2024 is proving to be nearly as challenging. When your agency is smaller or earlier in its growth journey, you might be able to count on the network and charm of your founder to bring in business. But as we'll hear today, as you grow, that approach is no longer sustainable. And if along the way you got complacent with relying on the phone continuing to ring without having to do much other than delivering great work, you might be feeling more of the pain today now that the market isn't as buoyant as we wish it was. The role of an agency ops director has gained more traction and respect in the past few years. But in my view, a marketing manager, or even having someone responsible for marketing as one aspect of their job, this is a role that agencies prioritize even less. It often ends up being a shared responsibility among multiple people with completely different day jobs, leading to poorly defined strategies. The result is that with no one properly accountable, things fall through the cracks, and when things get busy, marketing is the first area to be sacrificed. But we'll hear today that you don't necessarily need to hire a dedicated marketing person if you're smart about the way you run things. Our guest today is Claire Hutchings of Chime Agency. Claire is on a mission to solve the challenge all agencies face, their own marketing. She has 15 years experience spanning boutique independents and large global networked agencies. Claire founded Chime Agency after being made redundant and scaling her freelance business during the pandemic. In the last 2 years, Chime has supported over 30 agencies with their positioning, strategy, and marketing planning through to the development of thought leadership and marketing campaigns. Chime produces the Agency Marketing Benchmark Report, which was just published a couple of months ago. Have a listen to these stats. 46% of agencies are not practicing what they preach. 58% of agencies this year performed below the benchmark set in last year's report. 60% of agencies have seen their content marketing quality drop over the past year. Almost half of agencies lack a defined content marketing strategy. And listen to this, 56% of agencies do not have a clear target audience for their content. As I said, the irony is real. I'm really excited for you to hear this conversation and have Claire Hutchings remind us that we need to practice what we preach. Let's get into it and talk to Claire. Hey, Claire, it's such a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I wanted to start off with just sharing a bit of my personal experience. When I was an in house agency ops director, I felt pressure to drive the marketing efforts because there was no one else taking responsibility for it. So our MD would kind of look at me to drive things forward. But there was a couple of things. One, I didn't have the headspace to take it on. And number two, it's quite overwhelming. Like, where do you start? What do you focus on top of your day job? So that leads me to Chime. Your agency has such a unique business proposition. When I first heard about Chime last summer, I was both really impressed and kind of surprised as well, just because I thought it was such an interesting idea. What led you to the idea to create the agency that specializes in agency marketing?
Yeah, well, firstly, it's probably the only business I could ever run because my entire career has been doing marketing in agencies as a marketing manager, head of marketing. So it's my background. And when I started freelancing after I was made redundant, I naturally ended up working with agencies. And that's when I really realized the full scale of the problem.
Hmm.
I always knew it was difficult for agencies to do marketing, but at least the agencies I'd worked in had at least invested in a single person to kind of drive it in hiring me. But when I was freelancing, I just kind of realized the depth of the challenge that agencies face. And I think it's born out of the way we run our businesses. Agencies are quite unlike any other business model. We're so beholden to our clients, to the ebb and flow of new business. And it just means that being consistent with our own marketing is such a challenge. And I felt relatively uniquely placed, I guess, to be able to answer that challenge for other agencies because I'd kind of been there and done that. When we set up Chime, I really wanted it to build a business that explored and had all the same challenges that our clients face. So we run and operate as an agency and, trying to handle the same things for ourselves that all of our clients face as well on a day-to-day basis with their marketing.
And what kind of services do you offer your clients then?
Yeah, so we do everything from strategy, which might look at the positioning, agency positioning and proposition work. So
Hmm.
how they articulate who they are, what they do, how they do it, and who they do it for, all the way through to the more tactical elements of running their marketing. So the content channels, campaigns that they should be using to promote themselves. Then we either give that back to them to execute if they've got marketing function in-house.
Hmm.
And that at that point, we can kind of move into a more advisory fractional CMO role, or we help them execute it and operate like an outsourced marketing department.
Amazing.
And then we also run kind of much bigger hero moments for agencies, which are kind of big thought leadership or research backed projects that can really fuel a full sales funnel.
We're going to talk more about that in a few minutes as well. I know that you also have this agency marketing benchmark report, which is super interesting. Is that kind of your own clients you look at, but also how do you find the
Yeah,
agencies?
so it started off. We started it last year, and we've got 100 agencies last year, and actually it was born out of the fact that when we do a competitor analysis as part of our strategies for agencies, we score them and five of their competitors or five aspirational agencies on a matrix that we had developed. And we kind of realized that if we honed that matrix and we put a ton of agencies through it, we'd get some benchmark data. So the methodology is very much ingrained in how we operate. It's so part of our DNA of how we work as an agency now. Yeah, that's how it was born, really.
Amazing. So last year was super challenging. And what we're hearing and seeing is that unfortunately, it's still a very challenging environment for agencies. I've heard things like stuff is lingering in the pipeline forever, waiting to convert. Confirmed won projects end up going cold, and clients are ghosting agencies. Client budgets are tighter than ever. Clients that were reliable sources of repeat business have fewer projects coming through, and when you've been able to count on that repeat business in the past, it's
Mm.
not something that you might be able to count on any longer. So it's really tough. Do you think that in this environment, marketing can really help?
I do. I mean, of course, I would say that, right? But there's a couple of things. One is that my observation at the moment is that there's quite a polarization. There are some agencies that are starting to come out of the mire and are really starting to motor and see growth. And then at the other end of the spectrum, there are some agencies that are really, really still struggling. And the gap between those two cohorts of agencies is starting to grow. And one of the things that we see is that the agencies that are doing well are those that were consistent with their marketing and continued to invest in it last year.
Hmm.
We see in our research overall that the marketing scores dropped this year
Hmm.
to last year. And depending on what bit we look at in the research, quality of content dropped about 60% this year. And the overall scores dropped about 60% this
Hmm.
year. We rescored 60 out of the 100 agencies. And of those, 60% of those agencies, their scores dropped by about 12%. The one area that we've seen growth this year in our research is in agency positioning, and that was stronger by about 16%.
Hmm.
So our hope is that this time next year, we might be having a slightly different story because we know that those agencies with stronger positionings outperform those with weak positionings by about 40%.
Hmm.
So the hope is that this year, where agencies have been investing, if it is in their positioning, the fruits of that labor will start to show this time next year.
Why do you think the scores have dropped? Did you kind of get any insights into that?
I think there is the market turbulence has been a factor in that.
Hmm.
And, having less people internally, having to redeploy people, there's been
Hmm.
redundancies,
Hmm.
there've been a few marketing managers that have reached out to me. Often that function is the first to go and the first to be cut. And, we've seen it with our own clients as well. Our own clients kind of lost about 6 retainers in the space of 3 or 4 months. And they therefore had to go from being able to invest to having to survive. And so that hit us too.
Mm,
Understanding that strong positioning and the strong top of funnel brand awareness will come through in the end, but it does take time, and
mhm.
investing in that now will look after your pipeline in 6 months' time. I think we've seen a lot of agencies come to us recently where they need leads right now
Yeah.
because there's a hole in the pipeline right now. And that's a real issue if there's no strong marketing foundation and you're trying to jump straight to sales, it makes that job even harder. I think the other bit that I'd say around you mentioned about kind of client retention as well.
Mhm.
A lot of agencies don't consider their current clients within their marketing. They think of their marketing budget purely for
Mm.
net new leads. And actually, at the moment, in turbulent, volatile times, there's a real marketing job to be done on building relationships with your current clients.
Nurturing them,
And
yep.
often it's completely separate teams within the business. You've got a client services team that looks after the clients and develops them. And then you've got a new business function, a marketing function that's looking for net new, potentially the leadership. And there's often not a lot of cross pollination. And that absolutely is really key, is thinking of your current clients as another audience for your marketing.
That's a really, really good point. Would you suggest your clients almost developing a separate strategy for those clients as well?
Potentially, but to be honest with you, so long as there is good communication and synergies between the client servicing and account management team with whoever's running your marketing,
Yeah.
actually, if they can extract the challenges that current clients are facing, the current marketing and business challenges, and they're likely to be the same or similar to those of your prospects. So if you can kind of source those, understand how your business, how your agency solves those challenges, you can then use your current clients to kind of co-create content
Mm.
that kind of beefs up their ego because you're getting them on a panel discussion or whatever it may be,
Mhm.
or, taking part in a piece of research or a podcast and building a relationship with them, fluffing up their ego. And then you can serve that content back to your current clients, but also out to your prospects. And
Mm.
ultimately, marketing content, in my mind, should be valuable. It should be either educational, entertaining, inspirational, or all of the above. And therefore, why wouldn't your current clients want a piece of that as well?
Mm, absolutely. Like, really good point. I guess the benefit of also involving them in those conversations and that kind of content development is that you get to leverage the extended reach that provides as well. So that's a really good
Yeah,
point.
yeah, absolutely. Because they'll know more people like them.
You were talking about positioning a moment ago. So you're saying that, it's super important to develop a USP or unique selling proposition. How important is that? And how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, look, when in the UK, we're in a really saturated market. There's 25 to 30,000 agencies,
Wow.
depending on who you
Yeah.
ask and where you look. So standing out and being entirely unique and differentiated is very, very difficult. It's really hard to do, but being able to do it in a way that puts your clients at the heart so
Hmm.
that you are understanding and being very articulate about how to solve the challenges that they have. That's where I would start. It's kind of that marrying of understanding your audience and the Venn diagram of that with what you sell and how you do it uniquely. And if you can combine those things into a really compelling narrative that's succinct and understandable, and everyone in your team
Mm.
understands and can get behind, it does really help. The agencies in our research that have a strong positioning, their content on social performs 39% higher with client side organizations, because it's just really obvious and really clear what they're selling, who they're selling to. It makes the job of marketing considerably easier if you've got that really strong positioning foundation. And I think we talk a lot at the minute about niching. Niching is kind of like a bit of a buzzword, and the agencies should niche. And niching doesn't have to mean into a sector or industry. There's a ton of ways you can kind of cut that. but being really clear about what your business goals are and how you do things differently and how that marries up with your clients' challenges, that's where I'd start.
Hmm.
And it can be really difficult to do that work internally. It can be really, really hard because you're so close to it as an agency founder, as a internal team. So yeah, sense checking that
Yeah.
work before you go to market, testing the proposition in market is really useful too.
Something you said there really resonated with me as well is that really, I think doing all this work, super critical, like you're saying, but also taking the time to make sure your internal team understands it beyond the top of the company. It's so important that you take the time to make sure it's kind of baked into your company ethos and everyone
Yeah,
can tell you what the agency stands for. And
it's easier to do at a smaller agency. In a founder-led independent agency, you often can find that there's a bit more cohesion there because the people that have joined the agency have joined because they're aligned with the founder's vision and values. And
Mhm,
as an agency scales, sometimes that can be lost a little bit because you've got different personalities and politics and departments that all want they all believe the agency to be something slightly different.
mhm,
So that can actually be more of a challenge as you scale your business. But yeah, having that alignment's really, really crucial. Bringing the team on the journey. There's a lot of times when I'll speak to a founder and how they describe their business is entirely different to what's on their website. And when we
mm,
start working with them and they start bringing in other people from the team, how they describe it is entirely different again. So there's definitely an internal comms job that needs to happen when you're thinking about this and knowing when to bring the team in and when to keep them updated
mm,
and when to have their input. But actually, when sometimes it can be death by committee, I've been on some discovery sessions and strategy sessions with clients where there's sort of 5 to 10 people, and then it's a case of too many cooks, and you're
mm.
never going to please everybody. So,
Yeah.
as a leader of the business, at some point, you've got to kind of put a stake in the ground and say, no, these are the business goals.
Mm,
This is what we're working to over the next 5 years. And this is therefore the positioning that we need to take to get us there.
mhm. This is a podcast directed at ops people. So we like talking
Mm,
about tactics. And I think a great way to start, building that consistency is to document some of this in your onboarding practices or your onboarding schedule. So people get exposed to that messaging from day one. That would be one of my recommendations.
yeah, definitely. When I was in house at Publicis, I would have a session with every new starter to take them through our creds and
Hmm.
our positioning. It's really, really crucial to be able to do that, but also to kind of keep them updated because as
Mm.
the market changes, we have to make shifts to our pricing or our
Yeah.
offer or our products or our services. So not just thinking that everyone gets it, but reiterating it often is really important as well. Yeah, definitely bringing people on the journey. And the other thing in terms of documentation is if you have got a marketing function internally, making sure that everything is documented and your ways of doing things
Mm,
is documented. It's a really easy one that can, because that a marketing department in an agency is often a bit of an island. It could often be one, maybe 2 people, just depending on the size of the agency,
hmm,
or a mixture of people if there's no function at all.
hmm,
Nothing is documented, or every new intern that comes in does a new content calendar and it's slightly different. And reporting is, if it happens at all, really inconsistent. So, yeah, documenting everything is a really good way because if you're beholden to one person and they leave or drop off the face of the earth or whatever, you're back at square one if none of that stuff is documented. So yeah, having that rigor will definitely build value in your marketing function.
hmm. Despite us working in this marketing and design sphere, a lot of people can feel quite intimidated about going about and supporting the marketing efforts or posting on social media as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'd always say having even a bare bones 1 page marketing plan will allow your marketing function, whether it's a marketing manager, a freelancer, or a group of people that are passionate about it within the agency, if there is one North Star for them all to aim for, it will help them be consistent, help them be more effective. So, yeah, I'd always say setting a budget and having a plan are really important to get that kind of consistency and effectiveness in agency marketing. And we often don't do it because it's often kind of a bit of an afterthought, or yeah, it's the latest intern that's going to run the social
Hmm.
channels. And then you get this inconsistency, both in terms of like the rhythm of posting and showing up, but also in the kind of the tone of voice and the type of
Mm,
content. There's just this inconsistency. So having a plan and a strategy, and it doesn't have to be overly complicated. It just needs to be relative to the size of your business and the resources you've got available to you. But having something central that whoever you have executing can execute against will really help.
really good point. So, when thinking about this episode, I really wanted this to be something that people can take away and go and apply at their own places of work. So, a lot of the things that I've thought about are kind of tactics, and it ends up kind of being a bit of this or that. So, bear with me as I go through it. But it was just things that were coming to mind in terms of what might be good practice. So, the first thing I had on my
Mhm.
list was there's a tendency for us to want to produce case studies. And so you end up having beautiful images and telling that story of that project. But do you think it's that versus talking about the value you bring and the solutions you create for your clients? Do you have any opinions on that?
Kind of tried to separate the two out by thinking about marketing content and sales content.
Yeah.
And your marketing content, to my mind, should be really value driven, you know, not giving away your IP, but giving something that's educational, inspirational, entertaining, that's valuable to your target audience. That's the marketing content that's generally top of funnel, but will also build relationships with your current clients. And then the sales collateral kind of comes in further along their customer journey when you know that someone has a need and a brief and they are looking for an agency immediately. That's when your case studies become really important. Case studies, client testimonials, awards, although arguably awards are kind of a more awareness piece as well. But
Hmm.
yeah, it's kind of separating the two. And I think sometimes it's why there's this reluctance from client servicing teams potentially and other people within the agency business to they think of marketing as sales and don't want to be thinking of selling to their clients all the time.
Hmm.
But if you separate those two things out and think of case studies as being there as a proof point further in the sales funnel and the marketing content is further up the sales funnel and to build relationships and to nurture, it becomes, I think, like you need both, but they work in harmony because they do
Hmm.
different jobs at different times.
Hmm.
And it kind of softens that idea for client services people. It kind of softens their approach. It gets them a bit more on board with helping out with the marketing side of things.
Earlier in the chat, you were also speaking about hero moments. So how does that tie in? What are those in a little bit more detail?
Yeah, so hero moments are a really good way to get operational efficiencies out of your marketing
Hmm.
because what how we would describe a hero moment is a singular campaign that will fuel your full funnel. It will be big and meaty, backed by thought leadership or research or something proprietary that you
Hmm.
may already have within your business that will give the leadership team a platform to talk to 200 clients about on a stage somewhere, gain PR coverage for, have an opinion at top of funnel. It will help nurture and build relationships with your current clients, nurture prospects, and then feel really meaningful conversations in your creds, your pitch decks,
Hmm.
and when you're having kind of sales conversations with prospects. And because it's one big thing, you then cut it up, slice and dice it a million different ways, and you kind of fuel your content calendar and fuel your marketing for the next 6 to 12 months.
Yeah.
So it kind of means that from an operational point of view, anyone within the team can kind of know the role that they play. They can really get behind one thing. It
Yeah.
makes it easier for someone in ops or someone in sales or someone in the client service team to jump on and write the social post or write the blog because it's all about one thing and it ladders back to your positioning and your proposition. And ultimately, over 1, 2, 3, 5 years, it can grow with you as the business grows and kind of become synonymous with you and how you do business.
I love that.
So for us, our hero moment is our research that we've spoken about,
Hmm.
and I'm here chatting to you about it.
Yeah.
But I also talk about it in pitch conversations, creds conversations, and it's also part of how we run our strategy projects as well. So
Mm.
it's become so ingrained in how we operate that it's really valuable to our business. And that's really the sort of thing that we try and produce, kind of design, develop, and deploy for other agencies as well.
I feel super inspired just hearing that as well, because I can visualize all the kind of campaigns and elements that can branch off of that. That's super cool. Which kind of leads me to the next question, which was I've been seeing more about the debate on kind of founder brands versus company brands. Where should an agency focus? And does it depend on the size of the agency as well?
Yeah, it's a really great question. So we look at this in our research and we can see that agencies of under 15 people,
Hmm.
well, actually, I'll take it a step back. Agencies, bigger agencies overall perform better on our matrix than smaller agencies do. But the one area where smaller agencies outperform their larger counterparts is in the founder's brand. And that's likely because the smaller agencies are really reliant on their founders and their leadership team to bring in referrals, word of mouth.
Hmm.
That's kind of the lead source, and that makes sense up until that point. But we see from the research and just anecdotally as well, but there's this gap that opens up between 16 and 30 people agencies where the agency's growing and scaling and they can't scale their founder or their leadership team in the same way. And the network that got them to where they are isn't the network that's going to get them to where they need to go next.
Mm.
The sorts of leads that the founder can bring in aren't big enough or aren't the right sort of business for where the agency is trying to grow or scale. They might need to be entering a new market, launching a new service, or just punching to the next revenue level. It's really hard to rely on the founder.
Hmm.
And we see that agencies over 30 people, and then again, there's a jump at the over 100-person agencies. They have this marketing machine that tends to start kicking in. And this shift needs to happen around the 15 to 30 person mark where you're using your founder as a vehicle for the agency brand marketing rather than using them as this sole route to market. And that's
Hmm.
where things like a hero moment can come in really nicely because it's an agency owned thing. And the founder is one element of getting that out to the world and talking to people about it. But the value lies with the agency rather than the founder themselves. So yeah, it's around that 15 to 30 up to 50 people agencies that we see that there's this kind of this gap. But prior to that, if you're under 15 people, then really leaning into your founder brands, then building a really strong, solid network, getting out, going to events, doing speaking ops, lean into that.
My next question was around whether, at what point do you need to have a marketing person in house or do you even need it?
Yeah, I'd say up until the £1 million turnover or kind of 10 to 15 people, it's probably not right for you to have a full-time marketing person in-house.
Hmm.
So you can use freelancers, potentially have someone part-time, potentially have it as, a responsibility of everyone in the team. But also, as I say, a lot of the marketing up until that point is going to be on the founder as well. But just be really conscious of the fact that you want to be laying those foundations so that you don't have this gap once you get over that hill of 15 people. Actually, if you're able to start thinking about marketing earlier
Yeah.
in a more consistent way, then great. However, having a full-time marketing person probably shouldn't be one of your heads up before at least 10 people.
Hmm.
And then after that, it really depends on the agency. Like for some agencies, making a marketing hire makes total sense because it's a really great culture hire. Often, because that role has to be, it's a bit of an island, but they have to be friends with every single department.
Hmm.
They have to be able to get out of every department what they need to be able to do their job. It can be a really good culture hire for an agency, particularly agencies where they may have moved back to working more in the office and remotely. Like that role can be a really good person. Often it might be someone that has been at the agency for a long time and you don't want to lose them, but they're looking for new challenges. They know the business inside out. That
Yeah.
can be a really good kind of cross hire into that role.
Oh, good point.
And sometimes it just isn't right. And actually, for some agencies, having the kind of permanent fixed cost of a marketing manager, it isn't right for this kind of stage of business that they're at. They might sometimes need quite senior support to put the strategy in place, and then later on need someone more executional. And so finding the right level to hire at in that role can be
Mm.
really difficult. If you hire too junior, the leadership team or the founder, or sometimes the ops director ends up being their line manager and they may or may not have any marketing experience. It doesn't necessarily fix all the problems that you thought it was going to fix if it's
Hmm.
someone too junior. But if it's someone too senior, they're going to get bored really quickly and not want to roll their sleeves up for too long. And then you're going to have a higher churn rate and then be back in square one,
Mm.
needing to rehire. So you've just got to be really, really aware of the challenges if you're going to hire in, and hiring in at which level, and then be prepared for it. So if you're hiring someone at a midway or senior level into that marketing role,
Hmm.
have a really clear path to progression for them, because
Mm.
otherwise their progression is going to be limited by how fast you as a business can scale.
Yeah.
And they'll get bored quickly. And likewise, if you're hiring more junior, make sure you've got a support network that's beyond just the founder to enable them to grow and advance.
Really good advice, Claire. When it comes to channels, then, where do you think agencies should focus and what should they prioritize?
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard because channels will be somewhat dependent on the type of agency you are, who your clients are, what your budget is, what
Mm.
resource you've got internally. So it's really difficult. I'd say channel strategy needs to be relatively bespoke and unique to each agency.
Hmm.
I think as close as we've got to a silver bullet is to practice what you preach. So if you are a web dev design agency, make sure your website is shit hot and people see it.
Hmm.
Um, if you don't want me to swear, I can re-say.
No, all good.
Um, yeah, if you are a PR agency, then you need to be focusing on earned media coverage.
Yeah.
And I actually, a PR agency one's interesting. I met with an agency, a PR agency a little while ago, and they were like, our SEO and our ads are working. And I was like, yeah, but you're not doing any PR. Practice what you preach first and start there, and look at where your clients are, answer their challenges, and go where they go, and do it all in line with the budget and the resources that you've got.
Hmm.
And I guess depending on what your business challenges are will dictate the tactics and the channels you use as well. If it's a brand awareness issue and you want to be seen as a thought leader in a particular industry versus actually we need leads and we need them fast, they're really different objectives. And so you need a different channel strategy. So yeah.
Okay, got you. I was just wondering if there's an easy answer, like just saying focus on LinkedIn, but I think you brought up some really good examples that it goes beyond that and beyond the content you're
Yeah.
posting.
Yeah, I mean, like LinkedIn really works really well for us, but that's partly because I do a lot of networking in person as well. So
Yeah.
in person networking and online social networking kind of go really hand in hand with one another, because I'm continually building my LinkedIn network. So that does work really well for us. We are seeing that kind of in person events, there's a real appetite for them at the minute.
Hmm.
Um, but that's in the last sort of 6 to 12 months, we've seen that shift into those really working well. They're nice because it works for your current clients, helps you build relationships. It does that thing of kind of, you get to invite clients or prospects to be part of creating the content there. So they can work really well.
Mm.
Um, but it does really depend. Like for us, we don't have an SEO issue at the minute, but for other agencies, they might. And it's pretty dependent on the agency, the specialism, where their clients are, what the challenges that they're trying to solve.
Got you. So, Claire, you were saying that your marketing benchmark report looked this year at UK versus
Mhm.
US agencies. What are some differences that you've spotted there?
Yeah, there's quite a big difference. Like, we thought there would be, but actually it was starker than we thought it was
Oh,
going to
really?
be. So yeah, we saw that we have our benchmark level, and 70% of US agencies scored below it versus 35% of UK agencies.
Hmm.
So they were actually kind of pulling the overall average benchmark down quite
Really?
a bit,
Okay.
which is really interesting for UK agencies, because I think it really kind of gives them, there's a real kind of untapped opportunity there for UK agencies that have a strong niche and or a strong specialism to partner with larger US firms or just go direct to client. And it's for a number of reasons. One, the marketing is weaker in the
Hmm.
US. The positioning is weaker, although there can be some really strong propositions. How it's articulated in the market is weaker in the US from what we've seen. Um, but also currency conversion rates means that we're cheaper. And the other thing that we've kind of seen, this is more anecdotally rather than from the research, but actually the client servicing function within UK agencies is much stronger than in the US.
Hmm.
And US clients like working with UK agencies because they get that, build stronger relationships and given the TLC in a way that perhaps are not in quite the same way in the US.
Okay.
So from an ops point of view, how we run our agency businesses, I think is attractive to the US market. So it's a real opportunity. And yeah, for US based agencies, particularly those looking to enter the UK market, there's a real job to be done on messaging. They tend to go straight to sales without having any of that foundation or value led content. So there's an opportunity for them to take more of a content led approach, a value led approach to their marketing.
Okay. Super interesting. And then what about kind of larger agencies versus smaller? I know you've kind of talked about some of that throughout this conversation. What are kind of differences you see there?
Yeah, so I think there's definitely a way for larger agencies to they perform better because they've got more of a marketing machine, they've got more resource, they've got bigger budgets. So it makes sense that they're going to perform better on our scale.
Hmm.
I think where the opportunities are for much larger agencies is it can sometimes be difficult when you've grown to over 100 people and you're full service because you've tagged on a service here and you work for lots of different types of businesses. It can be difficult on your website, for example, to be very clear about who you are and what you do.
Mm.
So that's kind of a watch out. And niching doesn't necessarily feel like an option for those bigger businesses. So having absolute clarity about your purpose, your values, what you do for your clients, and the challenges you solve is really important for those bigger agencies. But there's also an opportunity for them to kind of look at the next layer down of future managers, leaders of the business, and how they can start using them as advocates and building their personal brand as well. That job may be done on the senior leadership team, if not still a work in progress, but you've got an army of people that you can use as your advocates, and helping them to build their personal brands is possibly another route. And yeah, having a hero moment for those bigger businesses, they've got the budget to really put behind something like that. I think I'd say that something like the Ada Trust Barometer, which is, big PR agency, independent global PR agency, and their trust barometer when it comes out every year is kind of a highlight, and it features in national press and is
Mm.
quoted often. And so bigger agencies should be, I think, striving to have something that is so synonymous with them but it takes on almost a life of its own. And they're in a much stronger position to be able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are really really great examples of what they could be doing if they're not already. On the other end of the spectrum, not to smaller agencies, but if this is kind of the question I've been most excited to ask you. If your marketing efforts are in shambles, what are some of your quick wins that you would recommend to get people on their feet and feeling good about what they're doing?
So use your downtime effectively. We know agency life feels mental a lot of the time, but when you have downtime, use it or
Yeah.
build the downtime in. If you're an ops person or a traffic manager, build in time where a strong group of people can come together and have a concerted effort around a marketing challenge or problem to create content or work on the positioning or whatever it may be. Because if you can bulk create, you can then schedule throughout the next 6 months. And I mean,
Hmm.
that's what we've done with our research. We've bulk created content that's going to fuel us for the next 6 months. And of course, there's then space to be reactive and to add new things in, depending on what's going on in the market. But we know that there is a consistent message, a drumbeat of consistency that's going to be going out in emails and in social media and doing things like this. That's gonna fuel us for the next 6 months. So using downtime effectively is one.
Hmm.
I touched on this earlier, but setting a marketing budget, having a line in your P&L, and having even if it's a one-page marketing plan, those two things together will help build consistency in your
Mm.
marketing, because it will mean that whoever you have working on the execution has a single point of truth. If you don't have a marketing budget outside of your person that's executing,
Hmm.
you're always going to be reactive rather than proactive, because your marketing manager is always going to have to come to you and make a business case for spending the next 500 quid. So having a budget line and having a one-page plan is really important.
Mhm.
And yeah, then I'd say quick wins, trial and real life event. The reason why events, be them virtual or in real life, is good is because there is a date that you have to work to.
Mm.
It's not like launching a blog or a white paper or something where it can be a bit of a movable feast. If you set a date, it has to happen. And
Mhm.
that's really nice. And yeah, then just including your current clients in the way that you create your marketing and how you disseminate it to them. Because yeah, they're another channel. And at the minute, we need to develop our current clients and build those relationships more than ever.
Yeah.
And if they're advocates for you, then hopefully they'll share it widely with their networks too. So yeah, hopefully there's some quick wins in there.
Super, super helpful. Thank you for that. My next question is, we've all been hearing about AI for the past year and a half. We're all talking about it, thinking about it. Do you think there's pressure agencies are feeling to talk about AI in their own marketing and on their websites? And what's your advice around that?
Oh, this is such a good question. So when we did our research, each year we've got our main benchmarking, and each year we'll add another question in which is kind of relevant to what's going on in the industry.
Hmm.
So this year we wanted to know what agency brands were doing around AI, if they had an opinion on AI. But the reality was 67% of the agencies that we scored said nothing on their website about how AI is impacting their clients. So whilst there's a lot of proliferation on social and there's a lot of agency events, events that are kind of for agency owners,
Hmm.
actually, there wasn't a lot of agencies that were really owning the space and putting a stake in the ground to act as that kind of strategic partner for their clients to help them navigate what this new kind of emerging tech and new world is going to look like. And it's a real missed opportunity. And, it could be that we just don't have all the answers, but I think it's a real missed opportunity. And there's that on the one side is like, yeah, being able to guide your clients through this change, but also making sure that you and your people are fit for purpose too. And I think it's about experimentation and having an opinion. And we're a really small agency. There's four of us in the core team, although we've got a wider freelancer network. And we're building a tech product that we got a government grant to build. It's powered by AI, and we're experimenting with it, and it's giving us a front row seat on this kind of emerging industry
Hmm.
that we wouldn't have otherwise.
Mm.
But we're a really small team. So if we can do it in the much larger entities, particularly those that have already got kind of a tech background, like you can experiment with this technology and guide your clients through a change. And I think that that's where agencies need to push themselves in the future, is to be more strategic, push yourselves up the value chain, and then you can get away from this fight at the bottom of kind of
Mhm.
creating mass content and loads of digital assets, because that's not the fun bit. The fun bit's at the top of the chain. And hopefully AI will be a huge opportunity for agencies to really prove their worth and their value and start charging more for their services, because they're going to be going in at a more strategic and creative level.
I love that you said that as well, because I think there's also this fear that if you're using AI to improve your efficiency in producing this content or whatever it is that you're doing, that there's going to be pressure to lower your prices because you can do it faster. And that's not necessarily the way that you need to look at it.
Oh, I would say the opposite, that you can do more of the work that really gets you out of bed in the morning and less of the work that's less valuable to you and to your clients. It can
Hmm.
be hopefully move the conversation on from time for money and price per deliverable, and actually sell creativity and sell
Hmm.
strategy and use AI to make your job easier and to do more with less.
Absolutely. So, Claire, we've covered a lot today in this session. Is there anything that you haven't had a chance to say, or any advice that you'd like to give that you haven't already had the chance to speak about?
From an ops point of view, so when you're like looking at tech stack and people and how that all works together for your marketing, is just try and be as holistic as you can, have a plan in place, get the right people into the job, and understand that there isn't a perfect silver bullet to this stuff. There really isn't. If there was, we'd all be doing it and I
Hmm.
wouldn't have a business. Marketing is a kind of a test and learn approach and iterate and evolve. And I suspect that is what agency ops is too, because as soon as you figure one problem out, something else breaks, because then you grow and it doesn't work anymore. And marketing is kind of the same. So hopefully the listeners to this podcast will have a lot that they can bring to help, help agency marketers navigate as well.
Definitely. Thank you so much for that. So, if people want to find out more about your agency and the Agency Marketing Benchmark Report, where can they go and find that?
Yeah, so we're at chime.agency, and
Okay.
you can find the benchmark report at chime.agency/benchmark-report. And if there's
All right.
anything in there that's particularly interesting to you, or you want to dig a bit deeper into anything, there's loads of data points that we have. So if you are a particular type of agency of a particular size and you want to know how you score versus your competitors or versus the wider benchmark data that we've got, then let us know.
Amazing. Claire, thank you so much for that conversation. We'd love to have you back next year when the next
Yeah.
report comes out and we can talk about some of the learnings and differences over the course of the year. And hopefully everyone's marketing efforts have improved and their ratings are even better than they were this year. So thank you again.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Thank you so much, Harv.
So, as operations leaders, we might not be responsible for bringing in business, but we are responsible for ensuring the business is set up to do so. So, I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Claire. Some really valuable and actionable advice there from her on how to jumpstart your agency's marketing efforts if they're not where they should be. Before we go, a reminder that there's a corresponding newsletter to this podcast where we'll be sharing takeaways from the podcast interviews and articles on best practice for your agency ops. You can sign up for this newsletter at scoro.com/podcast. That's it for today's episode. If you enjoyed it, please do rate the podcast and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. And please do share the episode with friends and colleagues that you think would benefit from hearing today's conversation on marketing. Additionally, if you've got something you want to share with the ops community on this podcast, or there's someone you want us to speak to, or a topic you want us to cover, I would love to hear about it. Please connect with me on LinkedIn and send me a DM. My name again is Harv Nagra. Have a great week, and we'll see you in the next episode. This podcast is brought to you by Scoro, a platform designed for agencies and consultancies, which allows you to manage your projects, finances, and resources, all from one system. This is a platform I brought in at a previous workplace, which completely transformed the way we worked, and which I've recommended to clients of my own. You can sign up for a free trial on Scoro.com. That's SCORO.com. Or reach out to me, Harv Nagra, on LinkedIn if you'd like to hear about some of my experiences.